The De'Aaron Fox era in Sacramento is over. The Kings sending Fox where he wanted to go, to San Antonio, and the deal they got back, not as great as we were hoping for. Zach LaVine is finally a King after years of speculation that he was on Sacramento's radar, and I'll share with you all of the details of how we got to this point and how the Sacramento Kings may not be done. It's all right here for you on Locked On Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily Sacramento Kings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is that time for another episode of Locked On Kings.
Hello and welcome into Locked On Kings, your podcast hub for Sacramento Kings coverage all season long. Today's episode is brought to you by GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off of your first purchase. My name is Matt George. I have the privilege of being your host here. I'm a Sacramento sports anchor and reporter for ABC 10 News, and I'm not going to lie to you, my head is pounding right now. I got a headache. I'm exhausted. My neck hurts from looking at a screen for really all week, but especially over the last handful of hours where business really picked up again for the Sacramento Kings in these De'Aaron Fox trade talks, and we finally got a deal done. This first segment is just going to be me laying out the details of what the trade is, how we got here, and some what's next for the Sacramento Kings. The next segment, the second segment, is where I'm really going to dive into my opinions on this trade. So make sure you stay tuned for all of that, plus some words about De'Aaron Fox and what he's meant to the Sacramento Kings at the end of the show. But here is the full final trade. The San Antonio Spurs get De'Aaron Fox and Jordan McLaughlin from the Sacramento Kings. Fox goes where he wants. The Spurs get their star guard to pair with Victor Wembanyama, and they still have a ton of assets left over to continue to improve upon that big two, that star duo in San Antonio. Look out, Western Conference. I think the Spurs are going to be unbelievable. What do the Kings get? Well, let's talk about the Bulls too, because the Bulls were a third team in this deal. The Chicago Bulls get Zach Collins and Trey Jones from the San Antonio Spurs. Kevin Huerter is no longer a Sacramento King. He is now in Chicago. And the Bulls get their 2025 first round pick back from the San Antonio Spurs. What did the Kings get, do you ask? Well, Zach LaVine is a Sacramento King, and from the San Antonio Spurs, the player that the Sacramento Kings got, Sidy Cissoko. They also got 6 total picks in this trade. The 3 first-rounders are as follows. The 2025 Charlotte Hornets first-round pick, which is top 14 protected. The 2027 San Antonio Spurs first-round pick, which is unprotected. And the 2031 Minnesota Timberwolves first-round pick, which is also unprotected. The 3 seconds that the Kings got, a 2025 Chicago Bulls second-rounder, a 2028 Denver Nuggets second-rounder, and the Kings get their own 2028 second-round pick back. Let me tell you, getting to this point was exhausting, right? I don't claim to be an NBA insider. I'm not up there with the Shams and the Chris Haynes and those guys, the Sam Amics of the world. But I have been keeping as close of tabs on this entire De'Aaron Fox trade saga in Sacramento as I can over the last week, or as I could. And I shared with you literally everything that I could possibly share. There were so many moving parts to this deal, and so many things that were constantly changing by the day, by the hour by the minute. One of the things that was most consistent throughout this entire negotiation process is the San Antonio Spurs kind of lowballing the Sacramento Kings, right? It was pretty well known right from the very beginning that Stephon Castle was not going to be included in this deal, or the Spurs were going to do everything in their power to not include Stephon Castle. While I heard he wasn't necessarily untouchable, there weren't many scenarios where the Spurs were going to include him in this deal. They clearly felt like they didn't have to. And considering that City Sissoko was the only piece that they had to give to the Kings to get this trade done, I know they gave up two more pieces in Zach Collins and Trey Jones to the Chicago Bulls, but considering those were the only players that they had to move in this deal, the Spurs playing hardball worked. So because the Spurs were lowballing the Kings, not just not offering them some of their top name players, but also not offering the Sacramento Kings their best draft picks, right? The Spurs still own the Atlanta Hawks 2025 first round pick, which is unprotected. That was an asset, of course, the Sacramento Kings were going after, and the Spurs managed to get this deal done without moving on from. Whether the Spurs are considering using that pick this summer to draft a top talent to add to this Fox and Wemby core, or they're looking to trade it before this deadline, or trade it on draft night, I have no idea. But the reality is the Kings did not get that pick. The Kings didn't even get their 2031 pick swap back from the San Antonio Spurs. That pick swap that the Kings sent over there as part of the DeMar DeRozan trade earlier on this offseason. It's hilarious. The Kings, Bulls, and Spurs all worked together to get that DeRozan trade done in the summertime. And here we are 6 or so months later, and the Kings, Bulls, and Spurs worked together to get this blockbuster deal done. So the Kings know that they're not going to get anything great from the San Antonio Spurs. So the Spurs were very consistent on this is the offer, this is the line, we're not really budging. That's why talks cooled down at different times, because the Kings knew, okay, that's not good enough. When talks reignited, it was when the Kings were looking elsewhere, looking at other teams, at potential pieces that they could get in this deal, making it a multi-team trade in order to get somebody, some kind of name to replace De'Aaron Fox or to bring in to make up for some of Fox's lost production. That's where Zach LaVine comes in. And again, we'll break down and I'll share with you my opinions on LaVine and Sissoko and all the elements of this deal in just a second. But I'm telling you right now, If I haven't gained your trust or your belief or if I haven't built credibility for myself over the course of this week with everything that's been going on with these Fox trades and how on top of it I've tried to be, I don't know what else I can do, but I implore you to believe me. The Sacramento Kings are not done. That does not mean that they're going to get another deal done for sure. That does not mean that there's not another deal on the table ready for the Kings to fire off again. But the Kings are actively, still aggressively negotiating and looking for more deals to continue to try to improve this roster before February 6th trade deadline, right? They have 6 picks now to work with. 3 so-so firsts, really pretty much bad firsts, if we're being honest with you. We'll get to that later. And 3 second-round picks. Well, that's good that the Kings have second-rounders again because they sold or gave away all their second-rounders over the last year or so in different kind of deals. Maybe they can use those second-rounders to go out and get like a Jonas Valanciunas if they still wanted him. I have no idea. But regardless, the Kings have assets now to work with a little bit. And they are going to look to use these assets to go and continue to improve this roster because, as I said for you throughout this entire circumstance, this entire negotiation saga, the Kings are still in win-now mode. It's crazy to still be in win-now mode and trade away your star and the best player in this deal, but that's the reality of where the Sacramento Kings are at. They're still trying to win right now. So do not think that this is over. Do not think that this is done. The De'Aaron Fox era in Sacramento is over and done with. We have the relief or the pain and sadness of it being over. But there's still more to come, and there's going to be more rumors and more negotiations and more tweets coming over the next handful of days before the deadline itself. So keep an eye and an ear out for that. You can follow me on Twitter at MattGeorgeSack. That's where I post a lot of, or I guess it's X now, at MattGeorgeSack. That's where I post a lot of the updates that I am hearing. And you, of course, can continue to keep follow here on Locked On Kings. I'll share with you anything that I have on the Locked On Kings podcast. And if you have any specific questions, feel free to email me, mattgeorgesports@gmail.com. Now, let's get into my opinion of what the Sacramento Kings got for De'Aaron Fox. That's all coming here in just a second. Today's episode of the Locked On Kings podcast is brought to you by GameTime. If you're looking for tickets to the next big event, whether it's a concert, a comedy show, a theatrical production, or hey, maybe you want to come to the Golden One Center to see the new look Sacramento Kings led by Zach LaVine and Malik Monk in action. If you're going to do that, if you're going to go to these events, get your tickets on GameTime. And GameTime Picks is their feature that is unbelievably simple, but incredibly helpful, right? GameTime Picks goes through and finds you the best deals for whatever event you're looking for, right? It goes through thousands of tickets that may be available for that event and shows you only the best deals in different areas so you can find the right tickets in the right area and for the right price to fit your budget. Plus their seat view feature, it's second to none, right? It's the most accurate seat view that you are going to get anywhere. And the best part, you're covered with GameTime's lowest price guarantee. If you find a better deal somewhere else, they'll refund you 110% of the difference. Plus your tickets are guaranteed to be delivered on time with easy cancellation options if something comes up. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download GameTime today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, now let's get into what I think about this trade. I kind of had to put the opinions and everything to the side over the last 6 or so hours as everything's been coming through just to get the news out there and get the job done and get the reports done. Now that all of that is out there, and now that I've allowed it to kind of marinate a little bit and think about it, I'm not thrilled by this deal by any means. I'm not. Again, there's still more to come, we think, or at least we hope, but you traded De'Aaron Fox. You somehow did not get a single one of Stephon Castle, Devin Vassell, Jeremy Sohan, or Keldon Johnson. Not a single one of them. You traded your star to the San Antonio Spurs and didn't get a single one of their intriguing, young-ish prospect players back. I get if it was not Stephon Castle. Okay, fine. Even Devin Vassell. Okay, fine. You couldn't get Sohan or Keldon Johnson. Not a single one of them. The Spurs got De'Aaron Fox and just plugging him in to the top players of their rotation without losing a single one of them. What was this, a free agency signing? I don't know how in the world the Spurs pulled them off. I guess that's the Rich Paul leverage for you, and De'Aaron Fox saying the Spurs are the only team I will re-sign with. Boy, the Spurs executed that leverage to an absolute T. Absolute perfection. San Antonio Spurs fans, you should be giving your front office a standing freaking ovation. Now, I'm not going to say that the Kings got fleeced, because there's a lot of unknown. There's a lot more still to come, and there's a lot of unknown with what these picks will turn into or how good these picks will even end up being. I will say, though, my opinion, gut feeling, knee-jerk reaction to these picks, they suck. The 2025 Charlotte first-round pick, top 14 protected, that pick's going to be a couple second-rounders later. Right? That Charlotte pick is not conveying. Charlotte is the fourth worst team in the NBA. The pick is top 14. The pick is lottery protected. It ain't happening. So you're not getting that pick. So that's not a first rounder. Let's really call it like it is. The Kings got 2 first rounders in this deal. The other 2 first rounders, the 2027 first round pick from the San Antonio Spurs. Unprotected. Oh, gee, that's great. Except by 2027, the San Antonio Spurs are going to be a freaking monster. By 2027, that pick is going to be like, if it's not in the 20s, I'll be stunned. right? Unless the Spurs with Fox and Wemby are just a total failure, that pick is not going to be good. And then you have the 2031 Minnesota Timberwolves pick. Well, I can't say that who cares about 2031 with the pick swap with San Antonio earlier this season and now all of a sudden go, oh, look how great a 2031 first round pick is. Maybe it ends up being good. Maybe the T-Wolves are dog crap for the remainder of this decade and into the next one. Who knows? But that's a long way off to feel any sort of positive way about it when you just traded a win-now star in De'Aaron Fox. Now, again, the Kings can look to turn these picks or flip these picks into something else. But these picks aren't great, considering the assets that the Spurs do have. All those Atlanta Hawks picks that the Spurs do have, and they didn't get a single one of them. It's wild to me. It is wild to me. Somehow the Bulls got the best freaking pick in the deal, and they shedded Zach LaVine's massive salary. They got their pick back. Now, granted, it was top 10 protected. So if the Bulls are one of the 10 worst teams in the league, they would have gotten their pick anyway. But on the off chance that they're the 11th or 12th pick, hey, they're still going to have their 11th or 12th pick. Meanwhile, the Sacramento Kings aren't getting Charlotte's pick unless Charlotte suddenly explodes and is great and gets to 15 or higher. I don't get it, man. Now, the Kings did get Zach LaVine, and I am a fan of Zach LaVine. I like Zach. I like his game. I like watching him. I've always been intrigued. Zach's been connected to the Sacramento Kings for a long time, people. This goes back to when Vlade Divac offered Zach LaVine a contract, which was initially agreed to, and then the Bulls matched that contract because LaVine was a restricted free agent, right? This was years ago. I've been intrigued with LaVine on the Sacramento Kings for a long time. We talked about Zach LaVine to the Sacramento Kings a ton this summer before the Kings got DeMar DeRozan. But what was the holdup? Look at the amount of money that Zach LaVine makes. Over the next 2 years, Zach LaVine is making $43 million next season and $48.9 million the following season in 2026-2027. Now, that season is a player option. But Zach LaVine would be a moron to not take that money. He's never going to get anything like that again. So the Kings are going to be paying Zach LaVine basically $100 million over the next 2 years. Now, let's look at some of the numbers. We'll compare Zach LaVine's numbers to De'Aaron Fox's numbers, because while Zach LaVine is not as good of a player as De'Aaron Fox is, of course not. Fox is the best player in this deal. But Zach LaVine does help make up for some, and a good chunk, of De'Aaron Fox's offensive production, specifically points per game. Zach LaVine is averaging 24 points per game this season. De'Aaron Fox is averaging 25. Zach LaVine's shooting splits. He's shooting 51% from the field, 44% from three-point range. That's really, really good. Hopefully he doesn't get the Kings curse of just coming to Sacramento and suddenly not being able to shoot anymore, but I wouldn't be surprised. And 79% from the free throw line. Compare that to Fox's shooting splits. All but the free throw shooting is better. 46% from the field for Fox, 32% from three-point range. So the numbers, statistically, offensively, are pretty encouraging for the what LaVine will come in and how he will try to replace De'Aaron Fox. Rebound-wise, LaVine averages 4.8 rebounds a game. Fox was at 5, so Fox barely better. Assists-wise, LaVine 4.5 assists. Fox was at 6.1. Fox better, although Malik Monk is the now assist god here in Sacramento. He is playmaker, floor general extraordinaire, and De'Aaron Fox, as we know, a way better defender than Zach LaVine is. Like, way better defender. One of the things when you're talking about Zach LaVine is his health, right? You have to bring up his health because Zach LaVine has missed big chunks of time over different times of his career because of some pretty catastrophic injuries. This season, Zach LaVine has played 42 games. That's 3 fewer than De'Aaron Fox. So they're pretty much on par with games played this season. Last season, Zach LaVine played only 25 games, so he's almost doubled it this year. But the good news is the season before that, Zach LaVine played 77. And then in the 60s, I think like 64 or something like that, the season before that. So Zach LaVine, while he's not going to play all 82 games, while he may not get to 80, he's showing. I know last season he had a freak injury, and God, knock on all the bit of wood around me. This is brick, but I'm going to knock on it anyway. Like, the Kings need him to stay healthy, dear God. Please, God. Don't just pay him to be injured $100 million over the next 2 years. But Zach has shown he can stay healthy. And when he's healthy, he's a really good basketball player. Now, the other player the Kings got in this deal is Sidy Cissoko. 6'8", small forward. He was a second-round pick for the Spurs in 2023. He's played in 17 games this season for the Spurs, averaging just over a point per game. He's shooting 42% from three, which is fun to look at until you look at the volume. It's super low. It's like 0.4 threes a game. He's also averaging 3 minutes of performance. So when he plays, it's garbage time. Who cares? Last season, his rookie season, he played fewer games, just 12 games, but he did play 11 minutes of a game when he played. And over those 11 minutes, 3.8 points, 1.8 rebounds, shot 48% from the field, but he shot 8% from three. So, I mean, hey, you got a 6'8", dude. That's pretty cool. But he's not going to play. He's just, it's whatever. It's just to make salaries work. It doesn't really mean much. Maybe I'm lowballing the dude. Maybe I'm being disrespectful towards the dude. I just don't have any expectations. So, the Kings' new starting lineup, or at least what we expect to be the new starting lineup in Sacramento. Malik Monk is the point guard, and pretty much the only point guard on this roster at this point. Zach LaVine at the 2, DeMar DeRozan at the 3. Oh yes, the Chicago Bulls have infected the Sacramento Kings. It's like the Bulls and the Bulls from a couple years ago, or the last few years, are now here in Sacramento with LaVine and DeRozan. Keegan Murray at the 4, Domantas Sabonis at the 5. The defense is going to be bad. Will it be any worse than what it's been? I don't know. Sometimes the Kings have given up 140 points twice over the last 4 games, so maybe it won't be that bad. I don't know. But the defense is not going to be great. I am very intrigued by Monk and LaVine in the backcourt. Like, there will be a moment in fast break where Monk throws a lob to LaVine and it's going to be freaking fun. I think it's going to be fun. I don't know if fun's going to win games. I don't know if fun's going to make the playoffs, but there are going to be some fun moments with Malik Monk and Zach LaVine together, and a part of me is very much looking forward to that. The Monk and Sabonis two-man game is going to be like, it has to be at a premium. The Kings have to do it all the time. It has to carry Sacramento at this point. That two-man game needs to be the Kings' bread and butter. And then hopefully LaVine can get some open looks off of that. DeMar DeRozan continues to do what he's doing. Keegan Murray keeps statistically, offensively climbing his way out of the early season rut. Offensively, I think the Kings have, surprise, surprise, a lot of potential to be really, really good and really, really exciting. Defensively, I think they're going to be a nightmare. And I hope DeRozan and LaVine 2.0 in Sacramento will ultimately work better than it did in Chicago. Both these players are older, so that doesn't make me feel too great. DeRozan and LaVine made the playoffs together one time in Chicago. That was back in 2022, but they lost in the first round in 5 games to the Milwaukee Bucks. And guess what? Stop me if you've heard this before. What do the Sacramento Kings still lack? Size and length. They do have more athleticism, right? Zach LaVine's a pretty good athlete, so they do have more athleticism. That's neat. But they're still undersized. They're still small. Zach LaVine is 6'5". I know Sissoko's 6'8", but he ain't going to be playing. That's what this front office still has to address. And speaking of the front office, look, I know the job's not finished, but they're on total life support. Total life support to me. I do appreciate the very difficult position that they were put in, right? So much leverage against them. This entire situation was not easy for them to deal with, and they pushed and they fought and they dealt with Rich Paul talking to other teams and being lowballed by the Spurs and trying to find the best case scenario, trying to find a way to ultimately get a name that's big enough, and Zach LaVine is at least something. But they're on life support, and they also have to own up to their mistakes. And I listed them out in an earlier episode earlier this week where I go through all the mistakes that the front office has made over the last 2 years. They have to own up to their mistakes that got them to this point. Got them to this point where they were forced to trade De'Aaron Fox in so many ways and get, I wouldn't say pennies on the dollar, but the exchange rate wasn't great. The exchange rate wasn't great, certainly with what the San Antonio Spurs, the small price the Spurs had to pay to get the best player to pair with their superstar. It's crazy. We will wait to see what more they can pull off. Again, I know the Kings are aggressively looking. I would be very surprised if there's not another deal before this trade deadline on February 6th. And at that point, then we can make a full, I guess, give the full grade or a full decision on what this trade was, or how good this trade deadline was and what job that front office did. But in my opinion, the only way that these guys are saving their jobs, the only way that they should keep their jobs is if whatever roster they put together, that roster catches fire, makes it to the playoffs, and even wins the playoff series. I think just making it to the playoffs and then losing in the first round, I wouldn't say that's enough either at this point. That's how bad of a job I think this front office has done. I still think the Kings need to move on from this front office unless they make it to the playoffs and win a playoff series. That's where I'm at this point. Today's episode of the Locked On Kings podcast is also brought to you by PrizePicks. If you couldn't tell by all the action this week, I haven't even talked about the freaking Luka Doncic to the Lakers thing. What in the world? But basketball season is heating up. And there's no better way to get in on the action than with PrizePicks. It's the best place for daily fantasy sports. With over 10 million members and billions in award winnings, PrizePicks makes it easy and fun to turn your sports knowledge into real money. Here is how it works. You just pick more or less on at least 2 player projections, and if you're right, you can win up to 1,000 times your cash. When Zach LaVine makes his Sacramento Kings debut, maybe it's more or less than 24.5 points. Hey, you take the more and he has a great debut. There's a win already right there for you. Take the more on a lot of Malik Monk assists. I'm going to say that ahead of time because I think we're going to get a lot of them here as he takes over the primary ball handler responsibilities from De'Aaron Fox. That's just an example of a couple different ways that you can play with the Sacramento Kings specifically. Check out the promos tab for all sorts of great events that are going on, especially around the Super Bowl right now. You can pair Super Bowl picks with NBA picks. Of course, when baseball season comes back, you can get involved with that as well. There's so many fun, unique, and interesting ways to play on PrizePicks. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNBA to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNBA for $50 instantly after you play that first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. So now is the part of the podcast where I get a little sappy and sentimental. I want to say thank you to De'Aaron Fox. In my mind, a top 3 Sacramento King of all time, second to Chris Webber and Mitch Richmond, right? And here's just he leaves the Sacramento Kings first in assists, first in steals, second in points, third in free throws, fourth in games played, and fourth in 3-pointers made. He is all over the record books of the Sacramento Kings. And even though the ending was rocky and not great, and Fox is certainly not blameless, and I know he only won one, or really had only one great season here, or good season here in Sacramento, only made the playoffs one time, blah, 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 blah. Me personally, I had a lot of joy from the De'Aaron Fox era here in Sacramento. I remember when I was working at Sacktown Sports 1140 Radio, being at a draft watch party and listening to the pop of a bar in downtown Sacramento filled shoulder to shoulder with Kings fans cheering when the Kings selected De'Aaron Fox with the 5th overall pick. Right? De'Aaron has meant a ton to this city. He's done a ton for this city. He and his family are wonderful. His 2 little children who were born here or were born while he was here in Sacramento, his son Rain, his daughter, right? Rasay Fox, got the opportunity to speak to a couple of times. Nothing but great things to say about her. And then De'Aaron, look, in many ways I've watched him grow up. I've also grown up with him in many ways, right? I was young in this industry when he was young in the NBA. And my favorite conversations that I had with De'Aaron Fox had nothing to do with basketball. Getting to chat with him about video games or whatever other interests that we had, stuff like that. Those are things that I just will always appreciate about Fox. Plus the unbelievable moments that he gave us, even during losing seasons here in Sacramento, his unbelievable moments on the floor. De'Aaron was nothing but a total pro to me. I know we had a couple instances where we clashed on social media whether it was the Ja Morant commercial, Hulu commercial thing that was misunderstood or taken out of context by Fox, or him clapping back on me for the Lonzo Ball or LaMelo Ball had him on skates or whatever. But here's the thing about Fox. Fox is real. Man, he's a straight shooter. It's one of the things I appreciate so much about him. He didn't give a damn what you think. He's going to speak his mind. And as a media member and someone that just also wants to understand and learn and cover the game authentically, that was the truth. That was real. And even when Fox and I would have disagreements, or he had those clapbacks with me on social media or whatever, next opportunity I got to see him in person, ask him a question, again, always treated me with the utmost respect. And I will forever be thankful for the time that I got to spend covering De'Aaron Fox. I don't know if his number 5 is going to hang from the rafters of the Golden One Center one day. I don't know if he's done enough really to earn that, especially next to guys like Weber and Peja and Vlade and Mitch. But he's been incredible. He's given us so many amazing moments, so many amazing games. And I just want to express my utmost appreciation for him as a player, him as a person, and wish him the absolute best. Him and his entire family, I wish them the absolute best in San Antonio. I know there are going to be times where he comes into Sacramento and he kicks the Kings' ass. I don't blame him for it. Even if he was a major catalyst in getting out of Sacramento. It's not like the Kings blindsided him the same way the Mavs did Luka. But I think the San Antonio Spurs are going to be fan-freaking-tastic. I think Spurs fans should be doing cartwheels in the freaking street tonight, because this duo of Fox and Wemby is going to be nasty. Nasty in San Antonio. And even if it's going to be in the Kings conference and in many times at the expense of the Sacramento Kings, the basketball fan in me cannot wait to see that duo together and see what they can accomplish. So thank you, De'Aaron Fox. Best of luck in San Antonio. I also want to say thank you to you. Thank you to all of those who are listening to this podcast, maybe for the first or second time. Maybe you just started tuning in or following me because of this entire saga. And then, of course, my OGs who have been with me the entire time, right? This week has been unbelievable for my career. It's been exhausting. But this is the biggest trade to happen for the Sacramento Kings since DeMarcus Cousins, but I would say this is the biggest trade to happen for the Sacramento Kings since the Kings traded for Chris Webber, traded Mitch Richmond for Chris Webber. And I was very young at that time. And to be able to be a part of this, be all over it, right? Be involved. Like, y'all, I knew a ton of details about this trade before it dropped. And I shared with you what I could. Right, or share with you what I knew to be 100% true. I didn't want to be irresponsible and float things out there when I didn't have it confirmed or anything like that. This was a crazy week. It was an exhausting week. It was a fun week. So much adrenaline. And many of you wrote it out with me, and I appreciate you guys so much. Really so much. And I hope that future Kings trades, maybe a trade here in the coming days, I can continue to do this. But as I've grown as my time as a journalist, a TV reporter, a podcast host, covering the team that I love in the city that I love with the fans that I love, this week has been a milestone for me and my career, even though it's resulted in maybe a pretty dark moment or bleak moment for the Sacramento Kings organization. This has been an incredible ride. I love this job, and we'll see how it all plays out. Now, share me your thoughts. I'm sure a lot of you are not happy. Kings fans are probably not happy with this trade and how everything's gone down. Share with me your thoughts. The end of De'Aaron Fox's era. If you want to share with me your favorite Fox memories, please feel free to do that. Spurs fans, if you're watching, again, enjoy, man. If you want to take your victory laps, go ahead and do it. I wish your guy in De'Aaron Fox the absolute best. Take good care of him. Treat him like the king that he is over there. And we'll see how it all plays out. We got more reaction, right? The Kings play in Minnesota tomorrow to wrap up a road trip. Hopefully their energy will be a bit better now that all of this is behind them. We got one game before the trade deadline inside the Golden One Center. Hopefully we'll get to see Zach LaVine in person in that game. Maybe there will be another trade before that. Maybe there will be another trade after that. All of this is still to come over the next few days. So keep it locked into Locked On Kings because there's going to be more coming. Appreciate your support. Can't wait to have you join me on the next episode. Until then, my name is Matt George. You've been listening to the Locked On Kings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.